Pursuant to Section 84-1411 of the Nebraska statutes, notice of this meeting was given on July 30th, 2021. The meeting will convene at 6:30 p.m., and visitors may obtain a request to be heard form from staff or any presentation they may have for the meeting. In accordance with policy, the request to be heard forms must be submitted to the secretary within the first 5 minutes of the board meeting in order to be heard at this meeting. Agenda items are subject to reordering at the discretion of the board president. Please attend the entire meeting to ensure you are able to hear any discussion. Pursuant to Section 84-1411 of the Nebraska statutes, the next regular meeting of the Board of Education of Douglas County School District 0001 and the Board of Educational Service Unit Number 19 will be held on Monday, August 16th, 2021 at 6:30 p.m. in the Board Meeting Room at the Teacher Administrative Center, 3215 Cumming Street. The agenda will be kept current and available for public inspection in the Office of the Secretary of the Board of Education at the Administrative Building during regular working hours. Pursuant to Section 84-1412 of the Nebraska statutes, the public is hereby informed that a current copy of the Nebraska Open Meetings Act is posted in the Board Meeting Room on the north wall. Please stand and join us for the Pledge of Allegiance. Vice President Erdeberger will lead us in the OPS vision and mission statement.
Thank you. The vision, every student, every day, prepared for success. The mission, to prepare all students for success in college, career, and life.
Thank you, Vice President Erdeberger. Mr. Smith did notify us today that he would be absent from today's meeting due to a conflict. Roll call, Mr. Ray.
Cassidy.
Here.
Erdenberger.
Here.
Head.
Present.
Holman.
Present.
Cracky. Here. Smith. Snipes.
Present.
Snow.
Here.
Thielen.
Here.
8 present.
And is there a motion to excuse the absence of Mr. Smith?
So moved.
Is there a second?
Second.
Okay, it's been moved by Mr. Head and seconded by Ms. Snipes. Next, we have school spotlight. All those in favor? Roll call, Mr. Ray. Sorry. I'm all messed up today. Roll call, Mr. Ray, sorry.
Erdenberger.
Yes.
Head.
Aye.
Holman.
Aye.
Cracky. Snipes.
Aye.
Snow.
Aye.
Thielen.
No vote.
Cassidy.
Aye.
7-0.
Motion passes. Moving on to school spotlight, Mr. Maskell. Good evening.
Good evening, President Holman, Vice President Erdenberger, members of the board, and Superintendent Logan. Our OPS Proud Spotlight this evening celebrates the accomplishments of several student athletes throughout our district who earned top honors at the NSAA State Track and Field Competition. We also hear from Burke High staff about the community support that makes hosting the signature event such a success.
My favorite part was definitely experiencing it with my friends. Since I was a senior, this was my last year with some of them. This was our last year to really show out. So just being able to be there with them and all of us qualifying, placing in general was a great feeling because that's what I've been working towards since I started Hadner my freshman year. But then to go and do the 300 hurdles and win, the feeling was unreal.
Well, even though this was a pandemic year and the crowd wasn't all there, I love competing in big crowds. So that's one thing I liked about it. It's way bigger than every other meet. The long jump, couldn't get my marks together really good. On my last jump, I finally got together, so I was happy about that. And in triple jump, I'm ranked #1 in the country for 15-16 boys.
About a month out before Metro happens is when we start prepping, when all the things start to happen. It's a ridiculous, wonderful team effort from district operations to our coaches, volunteer ex-coaches. Our head coaches really take the reins, and they do a lot of the work, a lot of the physical labor.
I've been running track for a long time. So, I've competed on the highest level. This is the Junior Olympics for me. I was a little disappointed that I didn't get the record. That was a 10:40 10:51, I believe. I got 10:57 at state, but I ran a 10:54 at districts. So I was like right there.
Congratulations to our track and field state champions.
Thank you, Mr. Masco. Moving on to Board and Superintendent Communications. Mr. Roberts?
Good evening. President Dr. Holman, Vice President Erdenberger, members of the board, Superintendent Dr. Logan. The financial statements for the period ended June 30th, 2021 have been finalized and submitted for your review.
Thank you. Dr. Logan?
Good evening, President Holman, Vice President Erdenberger, members of the board, those here in attendance, and those watching the stream. I am OPS proud to begin my remarks this evening by recognizing the Benson High Thrive Club. Sharing our commitment to health and safety, students organized a vaccine clinic that connected 80 people with a vaccine yesterday. The event also offered back-to-school gear and produce boxes for community members who participated. This is exceptional. Way to go, Benson High Thrive Club. Thank you for protecting others at such an important time. In less than 2 weeks, we will open our schools for the first day of the 2021-2022 school year. Throughout the summer, we reflected on the lessons from the last year and our plans to keep health and safety at the forefront of our decision-making. There are many factors that determine a young person's health and well-being. Some of the most important factors include their connectedness to classmates, teachers, staff, and the familiarity of a daily routine. When school opens in a few weeks, our students and staff will have the option of wearing a face covering inside our schools and facilities. We will have face coverings at every district location. In fact, one of our schools has already opened. For those who have not yet been vaccinated against COVID-19, we recommend they wear a mask that covers their nose and mouth at any time they are at one of our schools or offices. We will continue to consult with public health officials, including the Douglas County Health Department, to assess whether updates or changes need to be made to our layered approach to health and safety. Reminding our families, staff, and families and staff to be vigilant about monitoring for symptoms of COVID-19 and not going to school or work if they are ill. We must all be responsible. Seek out testing if you suspect you may have been exposed to the virus, and if you have symptoms, not only to ensure your individual health and safety, but to also protect the health and safety of others. I know that all of our health partners do have tests available. Partnering with the health department to connect eligible individuals with vaccine clinics, we've scheduled 33 clinics outside of our middle and high schools leading up to the start of the school year. That's in addition to 29 that were held in late June. Enhance sanitizing procedures and practicing frequent hand washing, adjusting routines throughout the school day to maximize social distancing, and contact tracing and direct communication when we learn of positive cases. Earlier this summer, we distributed a survey to gather feedback from our community on how we can best invest our elementary, secondary school emergency relief funds approved by Congress. In addition to survey feedback, we hosted in-person and virtual engagement sessions at schools across the district. These included students in next level learning, families, and central office staff. Later tonight, the team will report out on the feedback we have received to date. While we were able to get input from staff who worked over the summer months, we also want to receive feedback from school-based staff when they return in August. Members of the greater community will have an opportunity to provide feedback through our website as well. The funding is for specific, one-time use to support accelerated learning for our students and prepare for future events that could disrupt learning in the way we have experienced throughout the pandemic. We value those voices, and we use those to make important decisions. We're hiring. Throughout the summer, our human resources team has advertised across the city and held a number of job fairs to recruit talent for our upcoming school year. Our local news outlets have also helped us spread the word, and we're all aware of hiring challenges throughout the country and actually throughout the world. We're still recruiting talent for position openings, including nutrition, transportation, and custodial services. Candidates are encouraged to visit our website at ops.org to learn more about open positions. Every position in our school district contributes to the success of our young people. We look forward to connecting with candidates who value the opportunity to serve our students and families. Congratulations to all of our summer interns who earned credit and income while supporting Next Level Learning. The recent intern celebration, where we celebrated all of our interns, was a joy to visit. Existing high school pathways focused on careers and education are part of our long-term strategy to recruit and retain high-quality teachers in our district. The proposed college and career academies and pathways would build on that by expanding access to every school, every high school in our district. Congratulations and kudos to all of our summer graduates and the very best as you move on to the next chapters of your life. To the North Transition Program for being recognized by the Association for Learning Environments for enhancing the educational experience for students receiving special education services. Our elementary students and families have been reading away. As of this week, we are 98.9% of our goal with Edison and Gifford Park. They started in the lead and continue. As of this morning, we had about 22,000 minutes left to log before we can claim our goal met. In total, our students have read and logged more than 1.97 million minutes. We're almost there. Keep up the good work. I look forward to announcing our goal met. I'm sure we've met it already, but we just have to log that time. Summer reading helps us avoid seeing summer slump when we start school in 2 weeks. And our schools are buzzing with activity already. Teachers have been busy preparing their classrooms for the first day of school. Tomorrow, we visit with our brand new teachers. Because our first days of schools are essentially staggered, I want to remind everyone about the specific start dates. Our elementary students will return on August 16. The first day of school for students transitioning to middle or high school, our 5th graders, 6th graders, and freshmen, will start their school year on August 17. On 18 August, we will welcome back all middle and high school students. And on 19 August will be the first day of school for our early childhood students. Families, please look for more information about the first day of school, back to school nights, and more directly from your student school. We are eagerly counting down the days to welcome all of our students back from what I hope has been a relaxing summer break. We look forward to seeing those smiling faces and the first day of school outfits. This concludes, those are actually the best part. This concludes, and lunch boxes, new lunch boxes, always a treat. This concludes my remarks for this evening. Thank you, Dr. Holman.
Thank you, Dr. Logan. Colleagues, Ms. Crackey?
We continue to be impressed when we see the two schools that are in the lead. And I have a question, what happens to them? We know it's a glorious thing to have been able to get that honor. Do they get a medal? Do they have a lunch? What happens to them?
They actually get more books, so we
That's
work with
what I
Scholastic. We actually work with Scholastic to deliver books for the children in each of
That's
those,
great.
the top 2 elements. I think last year we actually did all 3,
Or
the
to
top
the
3.
school
We
itself?
give it, yeah, it's directly for the young people in
Yeah,
those
it's
schools.
good.
Yeah, read more, get more. So fun.
Vice President Erdenberger?
Thank you, President Holman. I just wanted to highlight a couple items on the consent agenda. The first is 1.2, which is the approval of a collaborative agreement for career ladder in special education program. What it really means is something extraordinarily wonderful, which is that the OPS has a foundation grant. It's been a 4-year grant. We're going into our 4th year, where providing opportunities for OPS teachers to earn graduate degrees or endorsements in special ed from the University of Nebraska at Omaha. So one of the needs that every school district is experiencing is more special ed teachers, and so this is an opportunity for our teachers to be able to move in that direction. I know that the cost for this year is $261,000, so I'm going to assume that this program over the 4 years has been about $1 million that has been granted to us. Something else that I thought was interesting was 1.17. Basically, we have hired a call service, if you will, for the first 6 weeks, I think it is, of both semesters, recognizing that school bus calls are at a peak for those first six weeks of the school year. We have supplemented our own call service with a company that has been trained to answer those calls and help address those problems. One of the issues that the superintendent alluded to was shortage of staff, and that's undoubtedly going to be reflected in some of the transportation solutions that have to be made. And so this is a program that's only been in place for about 4 years now, where we have an extra set of ears and problem solvers for the first 6 weeks. The last item is 1.19. What it is a comprehensive full audit of all 110 campuses belonging to OPS. The last time a facilities audit was done was in 2016. They only did about half of the buildings, 65 or so. This is a comprehensive, thorough, top to bottom, soups to nuts, I guess would be the phrase, facilities audit of every single one of our campuses to identify and help us prioritize what facilities need to be updated and how, and give us about a 5-year timetable for accomplishing that. We've not had that and have oftentimes, I suspect, responded to problems when they happen. This will give us an opportunity to anticipate problems and prioritize them. So that's what item 119 is about, and I guess I'd like to applaud the superintendent for deciding to undertake such a thorough undertaking, because it's a good idea, and it's going to help us save money by fixing problems rather than responding to them. Thank you, and there's lots of other interesting things, but those are the 3 most interesting.
Thank you, Vice President Erdenberger. Any other comments from colleagues? Ms. Cassidy?
Thank you, President Dr. Holman. So Superintendent Logan already acknowledged our summer graduates, but I had to take a moment to give some kudos out to Omaha South High. I was able to attend their summer Next Level Learning graduation along with my colleague here, Mr. Snow. We got to address those students, and I got to give them a special shout out because summer graduation is typically smaller and a lot more intimate, but this class had 104 students graduate, which was the record of all of our OPS high schools. And I'll tell you what, that ceremony was held right over here in the TAC auditorium, which is a beautiful auditorium if you've never seen it. But it was no less special than at Baxter Arena. It was just very intimate, and the parents and families, I mean, you could just, the joy in the room was just, you could feel it. So I just want to give an extra shout out, of course, all of our graduates, but my South High Packers, 104 students worked so hard and tirelessly to graduate, and it really showed in that evening. So congratulations again to all of the summer graduates.
Thank you, Ms. Cassidy. Okay, moving on to public comment. We have 13 speakers who have submitted requests to speak forms. The board has adopted policy 8346, which provides public comment for a period of 1 hour. That same policy limits individual speakers to a maximum of 5 minutes. We ask that you respect that time limit. Mr. Ray will let you know when you have 1 minute remaining and when you have 30 seconds remaining. Given the number of speakers, we ask that to the extent you are able, you keep your comments brief so that we can hear from as many as you as possible in the allotted time. If you're in need of an interpreter, please let Mr. Ray know and one will be provided for you. We ask that you respect the opinions of all who speak and that you refrain from applause or other outbursts during the presentations. If the subject of your public comment is related to a particular student or staff member, we ask that you not mention the student or staff member by name and instead provide that information to Mr. Ray. He will assist us into looking into those types of specifics for you. If you do not get an opportunity to speak and would like to submit any written commentary, please provide it to Mr. Ray. He will make sure each member of the board gets a copy. As a reminder, we ask that you please spell your name and state your address before you begin your public comment. It is now 6:49 p.m.
Dr. Holman, I'd like to move that in keeping with the provisions of Policy 8320, and in order to provide all of those who timely submitted their request to be heard forms with the opportunity to speak, I move to suspend Policy 8346 Subpart E as follows: to extend the maximum duration of the public comment session from 1 hour until all speakers who timely submitted their request to be heard forms have been heard for tonight's meeting only.
Second.
Okay, there is a motion on the floor by Vice President Erdenberger to extend the maximum duration of public comment session from 1 hour until all speakers who timely submitted their request to be heard forms to be heard for tonight's meeting only, and seconded by Mr. Head. Any discussion?
Yes, Madam President, just a question. This is 5 minutes per speaker, correct? Okay, thank you.
Any other questions or discussion? Okay, roll call, Ms.
Head.
Aye.
Holman.
Aye.
Cracky.
Aye.
Snipes.
Aye.
Snow.
Aye.
Teelan.
Aye.
Cassidy.
Aye.
Erdenberger.
Aye.
8 aye.
Motion carries. Our first speaker for tonight is Steve Owens. Good evening, Mr. Owens.
My name's Steve Owens, Stevewens, and address is 5408 North 99th Street. Good evening, Dr. Holman, Dr. Logan, and school board members. I'd like to start by saying thank you to the board and Dr. Logan for the generous offers to SEIU Local 226 on our contracts for the coming school years. They are much appreciated by the members and makes all feel good about the work we do. Also, thank you to Megan Neelis Brash and Megan Stevens for their work on those contracts too. Negotiations are a tough time for all, but these negotiations have went smoothly thanks to your group and 226's group. So in closing, thank you to all for all the hard work and generous offers. Thank you.
Thank you so much.
All right.
Next we have Robert Miller. Good evening.
Good evening, President Dr. Holman, Vice President Ernberger, Superintendent Dr. Logan, and members of the board. My name is Robert Miller, that's ROBERTMILLER, and I reside at 7301 North 107th Avenue in Omaha, Nebraska 68122, and I am the president of the Omaha Education Association. Powerful and sustained change requires constant communication, not only throughout the rollout, but after the major elements of the plan are in place. The more types of communication employed, the more effective they are. The plan to implement academies and pathways has been a topic for many educators over the last months when the district first invited open communication through the plan that was proposed and forming more than a year prior. This board rightly paused the process to gather information from the stakeholders so that the board can make a well-informed decision before moving forward. During this time, OEA surveyed our members on this topic, and 40% stated they had little to no understanding of the academies and pathways. I would like to share a few of the comments that was received from the survey. 1, the district has not done a good job communicating with the teachers, either through OPS website or through emails, about any of the planning related to pathways or what pathways are going to be offered at each school. The second, I am deeply concerned that the district did not consult with the people who work most closely with our students, our teachers. Instead, the district makes overarching decisions without considering the unique needs of our students and without considering the challenges that teachers and students have been throughout this year. This is not the time to be implementing the huge structural changes in the district. This is the time to support and listen to your teachers and to support and listen to our students, neither of whom were consulted before these changes were decided. Our professional committee, as outlined in the negotiated agreement, provides a platform to share our concerns, ask questions, seek input from the district on various topics. This was one of them. The discussion and the need to further ask questions resulted in scheduling another meeting to continue our dialogue. Each discussion initiated brought more concerns and questions, and the OEA has requested data and research to address our concerns. We are still waiting for the district to share that information. The district does have great ideas, there's no question, but it fails at implementing at the plan. There are many examples over the last 15 years. This is not assigned to one individual at the helm, but it's an important observation that will hopefully lead to some changes. The critical piece is having educators who are in the end responsible for implementing the plan at the center of developing the plan and how it should be rolled out. There was a missing piece, valuing the voice of the skilled professionals who know students' needs, hear their voices every day. Educators know what their students arrive with, what their needs are, and the way for them to be successful. The mission of OPS, as stated before this evening, is to prepare all students for success in college and career and life. The plan that is identified before us may or may not be a step in the right direction, but there are a few questions that you need to take into consideration. Does it address the needs of all students in OPS in a way that facilitates actual choice of available possibilities by all students and parents? And that it allows the students to grow, change, and explore between when they chose or assigned to a school in the 8th grade to their graduation year. Your teachers want nothing more than to have OPS or their school to be identified as the best in Omaha. Educators know the system extremely well. They know what works and what doesn't, and we want it to work. That is why we are asking for 3 things to take place. 1, OEA must be at the table in identifying what the implementation looks like and how it is done.
1 minute.
To invite students to join the academies and pathways, but not requiring students to do so and not forcing them to continue in programming and classes beyond the graduation requirements. And finally, to create a teacher advisory board to share in a safe environment the inner workings of this plan with the superintendent before, during, and after going live with the plan. I have spoken to Dr. Logan, and she's identified a willingness to address those 3 concerns.
30 seconds.
We've just come off of a challenging year, and as a collective group, I believe we learned more about science, safety measures, and we've created numerous ways to enhance learning of our students. Communication is the key for success of our students, staff, and district. With the academy and pathway on the horizon, open communication is a must to ensure true success, and the OEA must be an active stakeholder as we move forward. Thank you.
Thank you. Next, we have Tim Kahn. Good evening.
Good evening. I'm Tim Kahn, Timconn. I live at 308 South 51st Avenue in Omaha, 68132. I have only one point to make tonight. I'd like to have a STEM pathway or program at Central High School. My wife and I have 4 children, all graduates of Central. A very good education. They're all successful. One is a licensed contractor working for Healthy Kids Omaha, and 3 are college graduates. So far, we have 8 grandchildren, all in the Central District. I'd like them to have the same education experience. You're apparently going to go ahead with the pathway program, and that's, in my mind, despite the obvious problem of having the auditor be the one that you're going to pay to implement a solution. But if you do implement this pathway, I'd like you to consider a pathway at Central that is other than you've outlined. The one that is drawing and pottery, I'd like you to consider a STEM program for Central. I know that all students can benefit from modern technologies. It could be in a classroom or laboratory, anatomy table, 3D printers, robotics, biomechanics, even as an introductory level course for all students to pass through, just to see, just to experience the amazing technology that's available. Who knows what it could spark as a career path. I was an OPS student. I attended Saratoga, Walnut Hill, Nathan Hale, and Benson. Entering 9th grade at 13 years old, I doubt that I would have taken other than an easy pathway had that been available. But as it turns out, my sophomore year at Benson in a biology class, we had an aquarium that was honestly filthy with algae and microbes. My first real hands-on experience with equipment other than a textbook was in that biology class, and looking at a drop of that water under a microscope started my career path. I achieved a master's degree at UNO, went on to study at the Med Center. I ended up working there in pathology, microbiology, and virology. It was a simple microscope back then. None of today's technology was available. but it showed me and probably many others a career path that was interesting. On this shirt are some things that are very important to me. And to this list, I would add that I believe that all students should have equal access to high quality education. If you put a STEM program in every one of our high schools, that's high quality and that's accessible to all of the kids. But if you don't, please at least do it at Central. Thank you.
Thank you for coming. Next, we have Kaylee Kayser. I apologize if I mispronounce your name, last name.
Okay, it's Kaylie, and then last name is Kazor, and I live at 116.
And if you're a student, you do not have to list your address.
Oh, okay. I want to begin by introducing myself. My name is Kaylee, and I'm a junior at high school. I attended public school from kindergarten through the first semester of my freshman year of high school, and then I made a personal decision to switch to homeschooling. My parents did not force me to be homeschooled. In fact, they were more nervous for me to switch than to stay. There were many reasons as to why I switched to being homeschooled, which I will share to you now. To begin, I was disgusted with the evil political agenda being pushed through the teachers in my classes. Here are only a few examples of what I experienced. In my history class, my teacher would deceptively plant seeds of un-American and unbiblical lies that only me and one or two other students realized. When I took my complaint to the assistant principal, I was ganged up on and completely shut down. My English class was being forced to read a book that was promoting arranged marriages, and a student came to school in full drag and the teachers completely allowed it. My brother was sent to the principal's office for standing for his religious liberty of not signing an inclusion policy. My parents brought my parent and I up to love every person, but not the sin. We were brought up that there are clear lines of right and wrong, and we should never compromise. My brother and I understand that there are biblical truths, and that we should never offend God by conforming to this world. The library would always have MSNBC on, but not any conservative news stations on. The teachers would have pictures on their walls of gay people kissing, and when I made a presentation concerning illegal immigration, my teacher would contradict me on every truth I made. These few examples pretty much summed up how my entire middle school and high school public education experience was. I constantly felt violated and attacked for my Christian worldview, and I knew that the only person I had to answer to was God, and I would not waver on that stance. I also had fellow friends who were girls who constantly felt attacked also and felt violated when I would tell them that the teachers were just trying to deceive them by passing lies as if they were fact. I stand here before you today to speak out against the evil that is trying to infiltrate our schools. I will begin by addressing the issue of proposed sex education that the Nebraska Department of Education is trying to put in our schools. This proposed plan is an evil, radical left-wing agenda that will harm our children in unspeakable measures. This proposed plan is this: kindergartners would be taught about cohabitation and same-gender families, and to make everyone aware, cohabitation is when people live together but are not married. First graders would be taught how to define gender identity and gender role stereotypes. I, for one, am very offended by the gender role stereotype conversation because it pretty much teaches children that if you're a girl and you act like one, it's wrong. Fourth graders are taught that sex is assigned at birth and gender is fluid. The idea of gender fluidity is an opinion and is not based on facts. As educators, it is crucial that we do not get caught up in current fads, but rather sound factual information. We cannot teach our children based on feelings. This is a slippery slope. How can we tell our children that if they feel like a woman, they are a woman, even though they are a man? If you say this, how can you tell a child if they feel like they should be dead, they should kill themselves? The honest fact is that feelings change, and the vast majority of people with gender confusion as children end up as adults identifying with the gender God gave them. We cannot teach our children to be led by feelings. Fifth graders would be taught that gender expression and gender identity exists along a spectrum. Sixth graders would be taught about identifying with multiple sexual identities, including bisexual, lesbian, gay, queer, two-spirit, asexual, and pansexual. Seventh graders would be taught about vaginal, anal, and oral sex. Eighth graders would be taught about abortion as a reproductive care. and how to develop a plan to eliminate an unintended pregnancy. This is the most disgusting thing I've heard.
1
Life
minute.
begins at conception, and that's a fact. When you teach kids that abortion is a medical procedure, you're telling them that it's okay to be murderers. How can you think it's okay to teach children how to make a baby and then tell them it's okay to kill babies? This is an evil ideology straight from the pits of hell. Satanists back up being able to have abortions because they claim that it's one of their rituals. So if you deny that abortion is not child sacrifice, you are being ignorant. Or if you say that abortion
30
is
seconds.
not child sacrifice, you are being ignorant and not looking at the facts. No child is an unintended pregnancy because God created every child in his perfect image. OPS must reject this evil ideology for the sake of our children and the generations to come. If it is not based on any scientific or biological evidence. All children are worth defending, and going against the grain of the culture is worth it. In Nebraska, the majority of parents oppose this curriculum and have spoken clearly and boldly
time.
against it. Thank you for your time.
Thank you. Next, we have Cheryl Adamson. Good evening.
Good evening. My name is Cheryl Adamson, and I live in Omaha, Nebraska. CHERYLADAMSON.
And would you state your address, please?
My husband wouldn't appreciate it. Being an OPS and Metropolitan Community College teacher for 36 years, there's one thing that is ingrained in my brain, and that
Ma'am?
is to be prepared.
Excuse me, ma'am.
Yes.
Are you a part of the Omaha Public Schools?
Yes.
Okay, thank you.
I taught in OPS also. 36 years. So does my time start now?
Yes, you may continue. Thank you.
Okay. Start the time over, please. Being an OPS and Metropolitan Community College teacher for 36 years, there's one thing that is ingrained in my brain, and that is to be prepared, whether that is with anecdotal notes, observations, and or audio and visual resources, whether meeting with parent-teacher conferences, IEPs, other meetings to ensure the success of each and every student.
And social responsibility, as we've defined it, requires that we disrupt inequitable institutional and individual practices. I'm going to say that again. We must disrupt. It is required that we disrupt inequitable institutional and individual.
Ma'am?
About the fact of my reaction to it, which was
Ma'am, we need your public comment, but not an audio of someone else's comment.
this country's history.
Yes, you just
Endowed with this ability to
I don't,
take
general.
into possession
It just says general.
the livelihood and, in this case, increase of black people upon their will. And social responsibility, as we've defined it, requires that we disrupt inequitable institutional and individual practices. I'm going to say that again. We must disrupt. It is required that we disrupt inequitable institutional and individual practices that exist in our schools. I was most upset about the fact of my reaction to it, which was, another one, another person, another individual to add to the long list of this country's history of the complete.
Okay, next we have Edward Ventura.
Edward Ventura, Edward T. Ventura Jr., 2811 Bryan Avenue, Bellevue, Nebraska, 68005.
Good evening.
EDWARD TVENTURA JR. Good evening, leaders of the Omaha Public Schools. What good teachers know is that they can't avoid or lie through today's challenges. A lie is always more of a threat than the truth, even when the truth is painful. Our children need to understand the painful truth of racism. We need to talk to students in terms that they can understand about capitalism, racism, stolen land from indigenous people, laws and politics, the driving force behind societal systems, and much more. We need to give students information that they can process, explore, and develop their own opinions and beliefs, and that they can certainly be opposing thoughts. Educators are building critical thinkers. Educators are talking about different cultures. Educators are letting students look at primary and secondary sources and draw their own conclusions. Educators are teaching the truth of history. That's not anti-racism. That's just good teaching. To tell truths and have students look at a variety of perspectives and experiences and a rich landscape of experiences. Otherwise, it's just propaganda. It's the type of teaching that imparts honesty about who we are, integrity in how we treat others, and courage to do what's right. For many educators, this is about trying to center everyone's voices in lessons so that all students feel heard and are represented, and that they have opportunity instead of just a few who have typically taken priority in a history curriculum. I quote UNO instructor Carrie Anna Sky. It would indeed serve as a form of gross negligence to the social development of well-being of children should current and future educators dismiss the significance of anti-racism education and to fail to engage in the sustained self-reflection of their own understandings concerning race and racism, end quote. Instead of outrage over teachers trying to make critical improvements, I wish the outrage would turn toward the lack of opportunity and inequality that does truly exist in our country. Educators have been entrusted with the children of Nebraska, and that means that they will continue to teach the truth. That means they will not ignore the past and present experiences of students of color. Many educators challenge those who want to ignore the systems of oppression that have harmed people of color in this nation. Education can open minds, but it is also a pathway for students to think beyond what is being taught to them. And I challenge people who say we don't need to teach this. I challenge them to first assess why they think that way and then ask themselves, does it really make sense? If students can look at our nation's systems of oppression and say, that's stupid, an adult can do the same. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Ventura. Next, we have Kimberly Shaneyfelt. Good evening.
Good evening. My name is Kimberly Shaneyfelt, spelled Kimberly, Shaneyfelt spelled Shaneyfelt, and my address is 305 South 52nd Street. Good evening. Thank you for giving us time to speak tonight and for the extra time as well for the many speakers that are here tonight. I would like to talk to you about the post survey. I attended the input session, but I did not receive a post-input session survey, and several others that attended the session did not receive one either. The question would be, how many post-input session surveys were sent out? We know that the pre-survey input session number was 818. So the question would be still, how many people were surveyed afterwards? I was able to get a copy of one of the post-survey input sessions, and I read it for myself, and if you have time to find one, I highly encourage you to read it. The questions are leading, and they ask if the proposed college and career academies and pathways will help achieve the goals of a portrait of a graduate. First of all, parents and teachers, of course, the portraits of a graduate's goals are fine, and that they're fine to aspire to, but what about the academic and educational goals, which should be stated front and foremost, which are strong reading and writing skills, and also a focus on proficiency in math and science? The post-survey to me is skewed in the way that it only asked one question where it allowed the reader to state if there were any components of the work that needed to be modified. Where did they ask in the post-survey the question which gave you the 78% approval rating for the academies and pathways? It would be very important for the board to think about the type of input sessions that were offered and how many people were actually engaged in it compared to the number of families who attend OPS as a whole. I think this is should be just the start of the engagement sessions that need to be offered to the OPS families. I think that the small number of people who actually attended the district-wide shows the need for more information to be gathered from the families on what they would like to see offered at OPS. Voting no on September 9th would mean more time for engagement sessions with the OPS families. Holding only summer engagement sessions after a year of COVID is not enough. It would be helpful to see what the OPS families truly would like to see offered at their schools. Engaging more of the younger families on the subject would also be key to the future of OPS. Another topic I would like to bring to the board's attention is the fact that as we face this next school year, there are currently not enough staff members to teach the core classes. So then how would we also find specialty teachers to teach for the academies and pathways in the future? My last point would be that the pathways and academies that were implemented in Nashville had 2 schools that did not use or implement the pathways. Why would all of the 9 of the OPS high schools be required to have wall-to-wall pathways or academies? As a board, you need to carefully consider why this program would be the best program for OPS. Have we carefully considered other options besides this proposed plan? Thank you for your time.
Thank you. Next, we have Justin Riddle.
My name is Justin Riddle. I live in Omaha. My address is irrelevant. I'm not required to give it.
Sir, it is a statutory requirement.
It's not.
It's a statutory requirement.
It's
for
not
you
a
to
state
provide
law.
direct-
It's not a law.
It
So
is a
thank you.
statutory
My time will
requirement.
start now.
Could you please cut the mic, please?
Madam President, may I
Yes.
can we take a 5-minute recess?
Yes. We're going to go ahead and take a 5-minute recess. Security, could you please remove this gentleman?
you.
Thank you so much.
I'm not talking over you. It's my turn. You gave me the mic. Excuse me?
We're going to take a 5-minute recess. What is it again? LB 83. Okay, thank you.
So I've been disorderly. What have I done that's disorderly? There are witnesses and it's on tape.
Sir, it is LB 83. It was passed this last session.
But don't worry, it will all be available on the websites, on Facebook. There's a reason you don't want it shown first. Based on the law. Okay, and I'm asking for the law. Sure. Okay, I will grab my. No. Why are you touching me? Okay. Let me move. And what's the law again? Now, before we leave the cameras, excuse me, before we leave the cameras, oh, okay. All right.
We will reconvene at 7:24.
Well, he's talking to me.
I ignored it, but maybe I shouldn't have.
All right, thank you all so much for your patience. We're going to continue with the meeting with public comment. And our next speaker for the night is Debbie Denenberg. Good evening.
Good evening. My name is Debbie Denenberg, D-E-B-B-I-E, D-E-N-E-N-B-E-R-G, and I live at 12712 Leavenworth Road in Omaha, 68154. And I would like to discuss the Pathways program. My observation as a parent and as a person is that it's obvious an 8th or 9th grader cannot pick a career path for himself. So basing this entire massive revision of our schools on that premise is a path to failure. And why should a student be required to pick a major in 9th grade and stick with it throughout high school? Colleges don't require you select a major until sophomore or junior year. High school should be a time for exploration, taking classes in new subjects, finding new things. Our students are just blossoming out of middle school. They don't know anything at all about high school yet. Why corral them as soon as they get there? Do we really think that our children, age 14 or 13, are going to sit down and consider their future and select the right pathway for them in 8th grade? Or just maybe they decide based on what school they don't want to be bused to, or what their friends from middle school are doing, or what their parents think, or maybe just on a whim. The superintendent told some concerned parents that making a student commit to the career path they chose in 9th grade is good for them. She said that expectation will motivate them to succeed. In 9th grade? We can't really believe that, can we? We're just going along with the superintendent, right? Maybe it's time to stop fighting for the superintendent and start fighting for the students. They need our help. An 8th or 9th grader, 14 years old, is simply not capable of selecting a, quote, career-ready choice, one with, quote, employability skills. What if a student picks a pathway but then hates it or can't hack it academically or wants to switch out but isn't allowed to because they already had their one legal switch? Or they can't switch because the other pathways they like are full, or because they are in schools across town. Know what OPS says? That's this body, by the way. It's not necessary for them to switch out because any pathway will teach a student the portrait of a graduate's skills. I understand that the survey revealed at the last meeting showed almost 78% support for the program. We can fool ourselves with data culled from a biased survey. Better, we can get out there and talk to people who have had the benefit of a more complete and honest description of what's coming. You'll find that 0% support is a much more accurate number. Know what? We trust our parents. We know what we know. No parent wants this for their middle schooler or high schooler. The people feeding us this might have PhDs in education, but the parents know it's wrong. Thank you.
Thank you. Next, we have Rachel Kolb. Good evening.
Hi. Thank you for the time to speak. Rachel Kolb, RACHEL KOLB, and I live at 1617 North 59th Street, 68104. I'm here today as a parent of 3 OPS students and as a member of the Omaha community at large. I'm here to speak in favor of universal masking in schools. When half of the students that attend OPS schools are ineligible to receive the vaccine, and a small percentage of those who are eligible have gotten it, I don't believe it's in their best interest to have it as their decision as to whether or not to wear a mask. It's up to us to make that decision for them, and it's unfair for us to ask them to do something that would set them apart from their peers. It flies in the face of reason that we would not do something to secondarily protect them and the community from the spread of the virus. I've been told by administration of OPS and several board members that the policy is not confirmed and that they are in constant contact with local health officials as to their guidance of what to do. It seems to me that the local health officials have not minced words when it comes to masking in schools. UNMC has released their back to school playbook, which very clearly calls for universal masking in schools. Our Douglas County Health Director, Dr. Lindsay Huse, and Dr. Russell McCullough, Pediatric Hospital Medicine Division Chief for UNMC and Children's Hospital, have both made statements supporting universal masking in schools. I am asking you to indeed listen to our local public health officials about this topic when it seems that our county is at a high risk because of the spread, and every county surrounding us is at a high risk because of the spread. The CDC very clearly states that there should be universal masking in schools. Thank you.
Thank you. Next, Stephen Denenberg. Good evening.
Good evening. My name is Steve Denenberg, Stevenenberg. I live at 656 North 56th Street. I shall speak about the Pathways program. At the previous board meeting, I spoke about the audit that the superintendent ordered without the knowledge or approval of the board, the audit that did almost no research at all and then recommended we institute Pathways. Let's look at that audit from another angle. The person whom our superintendent hired to perform the audit is Jay Steele. Dr. Steele is the president of the National Career Academy Coalition. The mission statement of Dr. Steele's National Career Academy Coalition says, quote, "We advocate for career academies. Our mission is to advise organizations in order to create and support career academies." Look at who performed our audit. The president of a company whose very purpose is to bring Pathways programs into as many schools as possible. Gee, do we wonder what his recommendation was going to be? I'll bet the superintendent knew what his recommendation was going to be before she hired him. This audit was no independent, thoughtful review with the goal of positive changes in our schools. As a neutral review, it's a fake. It gives the superintendent cover when she tries to implement Pathways, as she is doing right now, at first without even a vote of the board. But the story gets even worse. Last week I spoke with a friend in a different state who did the work to make major changes to his school system. Here's how he did it. They set up a committee, big committee. They brought in teachers, counselors, parents, administrators, education experts, physicians to offer insight and ideas. They collected their own information. They had presentations on educational models. They developed ideas for change, liked some ideas, rejected others. They met at least weekly. All of this was done in the open, transparently. They met for 3 years. Eventually, they came up with plans for change that almost everyone liked. Teachers, parents, students, all eager to try the improvements. You, on the other hand, were not given the opportunity to do any work whatsoever to come up with a plan to improve the schools. The superintendent dropped Pathways on your laps, and you've been trying ever since to convince yourselves that it's a good idea. No, that it's the best idea, without having explored any alternatives, while hiding the worst details from parents and thoroughly muzzling the teachers. No, this is Omaha, Nebraska. We are known for good schools, dedicated, involved teachers, and careful, considered action. This is not how we roll. I'll say aloud what you already know. There is no relationship at all between the Pathways program and any serious effort at improving our schools. Pathways for OPS was a pet of the superintendent from its inception. Any work or effort into tweaking Pathways to make it more palatable or to talk ourselves into thinking it's the right thing to do is misplaced and self-destructive. We need to eliminate it entirely now.
1 minute.
And get back to the hard work of improving our school district. Thank you so much for your time.
Thank you. Next, we have Ben Stengel. Good evening.
Good evening, thank you. My name is Ben Stengel, Benstangl, from 6944 County Road P39 in Fort Calhoun, Nebraska. I drove down right after work to make it in time, so I recognize I'm a guest here. Thank you. There are various hot button topics that folks all across the state and all across the country are speaking in opposition to, such as, we've heard tonight already, the proposed sex education standards. However, I came today to call attention to the subversive ideology that in fact permeates most of the disciplines, and I'm speaking my opposition to that ideology. The hot button topics are just a manifestation of what already exists in school, and we need to be brave enough to acknowledge that. And what am I referring to? I took a quick minute to jot this down. Biology has no bearing on gender and sex or humanity anymore. Math is too concrete and its absolute truth too intimidating. Science replaces a creator God and renders existence aimless. Social studies demand celebrating any lifestyle other than the traditional, and shame if you're not a minority. Medicine elevates doctors as gods in this one-time only existence without an afterlife. Finance sentences societies to embracing a lifestyle of debt enslavement. Athletic sports and stadiums replace supper around the family table and church services. History is a tool for fueling race and class warfare. Religions are celebrated and their respective holidays observed as long as they don't involve Jesus. Art is a manifestation of chaos, vulgarity, and inner turmoil, instead of designing order, refinement, and tranquility. I'm sure I'm missing some subjects, but you name the subject, and unfortunately, maybe I'll name the perversion. Red pen is too much harsh, abrasive negativity for kids to handle. Boys can compete in girls' sports. Students are taught that a baby is a clump of cells. Discipline in class is inconsequential and subsequently ineffective. Students are segregated all day among their peers instead of given diversity and experience and exposure to relate to all age groups. Court in the 1980s, the year 1980, outlawed posting of 10 commandments, stating students might, quote, read, meditate upon, and perhaps venerate and obey them, end quote. Unthinkable that the civics and ethics in the 10 Commandments would be read, meditated upon, and perhaps venerated and obeyed. Children can have health procedures and counseling or psychological therapy without their parents' knowledge or approval. 4 years later, the Supreme Court in 1984 ruled that you can only pray, quote, silently to himself if no one knows he is praying and his lips do not move, end quote. We have a problem. We have a big problem. I have 6 children, and I cannot in good conscience submit them to this subversive ideology, nor do I approve of my tax dollars funding this ideology. Administration, teachers, and especially, I'm going to look at the camera, parents. If you choose to salvage this government institution, I'm asking all of you, I implore you to get your house in order, top to bottom. And don't stop short with only the proposed standards or other hot button topics.
1 minute.
You may win the battle, but still lose the war. And if you don't do this, please reconsider your own house or your home as an exceptional environment suited to and specially designed for the nurturing, fostering, raising, and education of children. As parents, we have a tremendous gift and responsibility. There is always a way to rise to the occasion and be accountable for what God has entrusted to us.
30 seconds.
I don't know who needs to hear it, so I'll look at the camera again. Take back the children. Take back the children. Take back the children. Thank you.
Thank you. And last but not least, tonight we have Eric Peterson. Good evening.
Good evening. Thanks for hearing me out. Eric Peterson, E-R-I-K, P-E-T-E-R-S-O-N, 2243 North 127th Circle, Omaha. Forgive me if I stumble. I'm very nervous. This is a last-minute decision, and I don't actually have a prepared statement. I am here because I have a young child who is set to enter Omaha, and for weeks we've been waiting and waiting to hear what Omaha Public Schools are going to do to protect our children as they move forward. And so, about a week ago, I was very disappointed when I got the outline of the safety procedures, which I believe you restated earlier tonight for the most part. And from what I see, they are largely ineffective. I don't know if no one's been following the science or not, but the Delta variant is absolutely airborne. Sanitizing surfaces, putting kids 6 feet apart, these are not effective measures. These do not prevent the spread of the virus. The only thing that prevents an airborne virus is stopping it from being airborne. That's why I'm here to insist that you put in a mandatory mask policy at any school that has children younger than 12 years old, people who cannot be vaccinated unless they're one of the lucky few that made it into our local studies for Moderna. Everyone else is completely unprotected by the policies that you have set forth as safety. And policies, I might add, that, as someone else has already stated, conflict completely with the advice of the CDC, the AAP, and our own health director. I just can't for the life of me understand how we are not following such a simple procedure. And what we have now is a recommendation, and that recommendation amounts to nothing. Anybody who has gone anywhere in public can see how well a recommendation works. This new Delta virus, some little tidbits. As I said, I think 200% more transmissible than the original variant. That puts it with an R0 value somewhere between 6 and 10. For comparison, that's somewhere around measles, almost as bad as chickenpox. Worse than smallpox. We all know how good that turned out. This is not something that we can ignore or hope or wish away. We have to take action on it. There have been over 4 million cases. Oh God, I can't even comprehend the numbers. Our health system actually doesn't report all these numbers, so we have fun guesses. So you have confirmed cases, and then you have the CDC estimating that as many as 26 million pediatric cases. And according to the NHS in Britain, who has arguably better data collection, as many as 7 to 8% of children have long COVID. People love to say that children survive. The death rate is tiny, but 7 to 8% is an unacceptably high amount of children who are going to suffer long term. They're going to be set back 6 months in their learning. And who knows how it's going to go? We just don't know yet. Because we can't enforce a simple mask mandate. If we can enforce dress codes, we can enforce a mask mandate. And so I'm asking you, the buck stops here. The governor shirks his duty. For some reason, the county health department, despite having the authority, shirks their duty. So it comes down to you. You are the last line before our children get in school. And I would draw your attention to Chapter 12 of the Municipal Code, Article 1, General, Section 12.3, Duties of persons in charge at schools, gymnasiums, and places of public worship. No officer, manager, master, or teacher of or in any school, public, private, or sectarian, or in a Sunday school, gymnasium, or place of public worship shall so far omit or neglect any duty, reasonable care, or precaution respecting the safety or health of any scholar, pupil, or attendant. And it also states that they shall not, relative to anything appertinent thereto, as that by reason thereof the health of any person shall suffer or incur any avoidable peril or detriment. Basically, you need to take action, and you cannot by inaction allow people to be injured. I would also draw your attention to the general standard that our children,
30 seconds.
Our children are entrusted to you, and you have a duty of care to take all reasonable measures to protect them. And that if you do not do that duty, you're in breach of that. This district will face lawsuits. They will be in breach of that duty of care if children fall ill. It's happened before in other states. There's been lawsuits in Jersey and elsewhere. It's going to happen here. You have a duty, and you are the last line. And so I am asking you to put this mandate in place.
That's time.
West Side just did it today. You will not be alone.
Thank you for coming. Moving on to the consent agenda, I will entertain a motion to approve the consent agenda that is before us. Is there a second? Okay, it's been moved by Mr. Head and seconded by Ms. Crackey. Any abstentions?
Yes, I have one, Dr. Holman. I am abstaining from item I-12, which is Claim C, please.
Okay. Ms. Cassidy will be abstaining from item 12 on the claim C. Roll call, Mr. Ray?
Holman,
Aye.
Cracky,
Aye.
Snipes,
Aye.
Snow,
Aye.
Thielen,
Aye.
Cassidy,
Aye.
Erdenberger,
Aye.
Head.
Aye.
8 aye.
Motion carries. Thank you. Moving on to action items. Item J1A, approval of the superintendent's goals for the 2021-2022 academic school year. I will entertain a motion to approve the committee's recommendations for the superintendent's goals for the 2021-2022 school year as represented in the attached document.
So move.
Second.
Okay, it's been moved by Mr. Snow and seconded by Ms. Snipes. Any discussion? Okay, actually
Madam
didn't need a
President?
second, so, yes,
I do have a question.
yes.
Could you just, for the, probably for some board members, but for the public as well, just explain the reason and how we got to the goals or the new concept? That, thank you.
We did share this last week, but I will repeat again this time. So the process that we implemented this year is that the accountability committee, we have a shared goal with Dr. Logan. She developed one goal, and then the accountability committee also developed one goal. So we have 3 goals. The shared goal is the freshman academy. Dr. Logan's goal is ESSERS. And the 3rd goal from the accountability committee is external communication. Any other questions? Okay. Great, thank you. All right, moving on now to information items.
We need to vote.
Yep. Sorry. Mr. Ray?
Cracky,
Aye.
Snipes,
Aye.
Snow,
Aye.
Thielen,
Aye.
Cassidy,
Aye.
Erdenberger,
Aye.
Head.
Aye.
Holman.
Aye.
8 aye.
Okay, item J2A, elementary and secondary schools emergency relief, ESSERS engagement progress update. And we have Dr. Fulmore and Dr. Kroll with us here tonight. Good evening to you both.
Good evening. President Holman, Vice President Erdenberger, members of the board, and Dr. Logan. I'm Dr. Fulmore with the Division of Accountability and School Improvement, and I am delighted to share our progress with the Elementary and Secondary Emergency Relief Fund ESSER engagement. On July 1, this summer, we begin our use of ESSER funds engagement with the desire to hear from stakeholders on how we can make the most of this investment in our students' success. Our layered approach allowed us to receive input using a survey and through in-person and virtual engagement sessions. After a month of engagement, our results show there were 41 respondents to our survey, and we could not be more excited about that level of commitment to express what matters most for our students. In addition, we held 43 in-person sessions and 2 virtual sessions to engage stakeholders more deeply. These sessions allowed participants to share their individual thoughts and to work with others to build consensus about the decisions we should make for our students, staff, and schools. The best part of this experience by far was the opportunity to speak directly with roughly 300 students in our elementary, middle, and high schools. Later in our presentation, you will hear more about what mattered most to them. We are extremely thankful for everyone that participated. We value your voices, and it was clear that everyone wanted the best for all of our children in the Omaha Public Schools. We are continuing to review the input as we develop our ESSER plan. At this time, Dr. Kroll will come forward to share the data and the details of our progress with ESSER engagement. Thank you.
Thank you. Good afternoon, or evening, sorry. It's been a day. I pull a Scott Schmidt Bonnie. I've been here for 96 hours. Okay. So Omaha Public Schools sent out our electronic survey to a total of 75,561 individuals. 68,952 of those were via email, and the remaining were via text. We received just shy of 8,500 responses, and as you can see, the largest number were from individuals who identified as OPS families, followed closely by staff. When asked to rank the priorities of our 4 pillars, well-being of students and staff was the most important at 47%. This was followed closely by academics with 35% and infrastructure and engagement rounding out the choice of 16 and 2% respectively. So when we drill down just a bit at the elements of those pillars that individuals were interested in investing in, we saw that for academic recovery and acceleration supports, the large majority of respondents indicated tutoring and early literacy to be the most important. Well-being of students and staff saw social and emotional learning, as well as mental health services and supports. They were identified as the most important. Infrastructure for the future was improved indoor air quality, as well as school facilities to support health and safety. And for engagement, it was support learning at home and after-school enrichment. So, Ms. Ray, was this not the new slide deck? Okay. So our family community partner in-person and virtual engagement sessions, we had a total of 13 sessions totaling 225 attendees. Most family community and virtual ESSER engagement sessions included a ranking activity in which participants and groups were asked to select top priorities from the list of items under those 4 pillars that represented them. Their top priority was split evenly between academics and well-being of staff and students, followed by engagement and then infrastructure. In terms of specific items, the most mentioned item was tutoring, followed then by mental health services and supports, and health and wellness. Tutoring was frequently mentioned as a response to loss of learning through the pandemic and in context of supporting slower and struggling learners. Tutoring was also mentioned as a way to support students socially by providing a closer connection to school community members. In addition, tutoring was suggested to be integrated into the school schedule, such as in the case of high-dosage tutoring, as there are concerns about accessibility and lower student engagement if it is scheduled either before or after school. Most explanations and comments around prioritizing mental health services and supports surround counseling services and support, as well as alternative ways to support mental health of staff and students. For health and wellness, the mentions were elaborated with the concern for emotional well-being, as well as social emotional needs of staff and students. The physical health of all school members was also of concern, and there were suggestions to conduct health screenings and wastewater testing at school sites. So we also engaged both our elementary and secondary students at in-person sessions. For elementary, we did 16 groups at 8 different schools, totaling about 132 attendees. And as you can see here, the elementary school students were a bit more balanced in how they prioritized academics, well-being, and infrastructure. For Pillar 1, so we asked them about all 4 of the pillars. They were asked about what they enjoy learning at school, and students cited instructional content like mathematics, reading, and writing. For Pillar 2, when asked about what they did when school gets difficult, or if they face a difficult situation at school, elementary students most responded with mentions of student action and behavior. For example, self-regulating strategies, like taking deep breaths, using strategies to deal with hard emotions, things like that. For Pillar 3, students were asked what they believe supports safety, health, and cleanliness at school. The most popular response were in the category of whole school behavior and protocols. In particular, protocols around cleaning, sanitizing, and organizing were the most mentioned, followed by hand washing and other school cultural pieces. There was also mention of the importance of awareness and response to bullying. And the next most popular response to this question involves food services. Students mentioned healthy food choices as an enabling factor for health, as well as increased food portions. For Pillar 4, elementary students were most concerned about increased communication from the school to families regarding student behavior and experiences, academic progress, and school events. They wanted the families to be appraised of what happens in the classroom and updates about what the students experience. The next most cited item for family communication and engagement is the need for families to be able to support with homework and reading at home. Students want families to be aware of what they're learning at school. Some even mentioned the possibility for parents to visit the school. Lastly, we asked them how they would spend money to better their school or school experience. Elementary students mentioned learning materials the most. Of these, most mentions were student and teacher supplies, as well as writing instruments, art supplies, notebooks, things like that. So a few suggestions that did not rise to the level of statistical note, but I think should be highlighted here, were things like purchasing puppies for all of the classrooms. And if puppies weren't available, and I quote, cats will do, I guess. Another fantastic suggestion was to buy Roombas for all the classrooms. I expect they would especially enjoy Roombas being ridden by puppies. But I'm just extrapolating there. And lastly, and this one is very dear to my heart, one young man would like us to buy sharks. Obviously, I agree with him 100%. I do think it's a good idea to keep an eye on him to make sure he doesn't become a supervillain. Yeah, sharks, like actual, with lasers on there, yep. Secondary student engagement. The final group were secondary students. Again, 16 groups, 8 schools, about 212 attendees here. They were somewhat similar to their elementary counterparts. They were a bit more balanced on how they prioritized everything. It was a bit more even. For Pillar 1, we asked them what helps them learn in school. They cited instructional strategies that teachers employ to facilitate learning. Some mentioned group activities or group interactions, multiple pathways of engagement, as well as project-based learning. Another was the behavior of adults and students. So in terms of adult behavior, teacher effort, joy factor, enthusiasm, empathy, and assertiveness was mentioned as being supportive to students. For Pillar 2, in terms of social emotional well-being, adult behavior was the most facilitating factor. It includes mentions of ability of teachers, counselors, and other staff when students face adversity. For Pillar 3, students were asked what can be done to make school feel cleaner, healthier, and safer, and they almost equally mentioned 4 different categories, which was whole school behavior, to include culture and protocols, infrastructure improvements, food services, and janitorial services. Another important factor for that was, students mentioned food quality and food health choices very, very frequently in this pillar. Some were hoping for larger quantities and availability of food. Lastly, students think that janitorial services should be improved through more frequent sanitation, as well as the availability of cleaning supplies, like trash bins, and the cleaning supplies physically in the classroom. And for the final Pillar 4, we asked what they wish their families knew about the school. And secondary students mentioned they wish parents and guardians' perception of school experiences can be improved. They want parents to understand how difficult the school experience can be, as well as their understanding of the school's social experience. Contextual updates are required so that parents can better relate to their students, as well as improved ability to help them with homework. Students would also like their parents and guardians to better understand the school's grading processes, as well as other policies such as the allowance of activities, dress codes, disciplinary actions, things like that. Lastly, when asked how they would spend their money to improve schools, they also want learning materials, such as learning technology, school supplies, and manipulatives. This was followed by the desire for infrastructure improvements, like intercom system, internet connectivity, building upgrades, better furniture quality, more space for storage. Less mentioned but also important is students want to invest more in learning resources like getting course offerings that are relevant, more hands-on activities and resources, as well as improved food quality.
Thank you, Dr. Crow. It was sheer joy speaking with our students and hearing their feedback. We've accomplished a lot so far, but our work is not done. In the coming weeks, there will be an opportunity for the public to respond to our progress via the website. In addition, we will have extended engagement for our school leaders, teachers, and support staff. I am proud of the work and especially want to recognize and thank an extraordinary group of leaders and their teams that made our summer work happen. Crystal Boyd, Tina Forte, John Crow, Scott Schmidt-Bonney, Carrie Collins, Jeannie Talbot, Kenyon Chisholm, Latasha Muhammad, Jocelyn Perkins, Andre Tan, and Nancy Burke. I would also like to thank our school teams for offering up their schools as sites, Skinner, Burke, Nathan Hill, and South for being such gracious school hosts, and to our district communications team for all of their support along the way. Thank you. This time, we'll have your questions.
Mr. Snow?
Thank you, Madam President. Thank you for the presentation, Dr. Crow and Dr. Fillmore. I just want to go back to the slides of with the students. And the first question, how did you select the students, or was it for each group? I mean, how did you?
We reached out to each next level learning principal with the grade levels we wanted to see, so we had a balance of kindergarten through 5th grade representation, and we just asked them to choose 2 classes for us to attend. One for 30 minutes, and then one grade level for 30 minutes, and then another grade level for another 30 minutes, and they provided us with the roster for those students that would be in those classes once we left.
Do the students that you surveyed, do they reflect the student makeup of the district?
Right, so the students that we did pick schools for next level learning all across our school district. So we only picked from those schools that were in session during that time. So we did have a balance. For example, we visited with students at North and McMillan because they were on site with each other. We were able to talk to Central King Science. We were able to talk, do a balance like Bell Ryan. We were able to talk to students at Skinner, Kellum, Jocelyn, Gateway. So we did do a variety of sites, Nathan Hill, Northwest. So we tried to look at combination sites where there were 2 schools in one location so we can hit more schools within that time. So we just had whatever students were in attendance on that day, that's who we spoke with.
Okay, that's helpful because it's good to kind of be as close as you can with the demographics of the district. For your questions, if you go to the mentions for the elementary school students, social emotional learning, that's it. How did you break those down, like school climate and culture? How was that explained to an elementary? I was just asking Mrs. Cassidy about the ages, and I'm like, how do you explain that to a student?
It was, so we work collaboratively with our curriculum and instruction team. So our early literacy elementary team and our secondary team to kind of phrase the question. So we did have to change the questions from secondary to elementary. So, for example, we ask elementary students, when you're happy learning or when you're happy at school, what are you doing? What types of things do you like learning about at school? When you're having fun, or when you feel sad, what do you do when you feel sad at school? And so they may say, we talk to our teacher, we talk to our friends. Who helps you when you're not having a good day at school? And we also, especially when speaking with our elementary students, we strategically use those individuals who taught elementary to go in front of them for the most part, so that you're not only asking the questions, but you're also given the personality and the body language that is very inviting for elementary students to be able to speak in a way that makes sense to them. And I will tell you, we had some elementary friends that told me I need to ask harder questions because they are really smart. And they said I need maybe to do some second or third level questions for them. And he said it just like that. He's like, are you gonna throw some second or third level type questions? He said, because I can answer all of these. So we did change them a little bit. And we also had a list of probing questions. So if they didn't answer it or didn't understand it in the first way we asked it, we had about 7 or 8 other different ways. And I also gave our team that went out to say, put on your teacher hat. Sometimes you got to get creative in order to reach our little ones with those questions.
That leads me to my final question. So, Dr. Fillmore, I'm sure you're familiar with just the idea of offices, school districts across the country with offices of social and emotional learning. How do we explain that to students, not just elementary school students, but middle and high school students, so they understand how their brain works, how trauma happens, where it's stored, and how to process it and how to deal with it, especially in today's, because a lot of students are just excited to go back to school.
Right.
And they'll forget about the 18 months that just happened to them, but that still stays with them, whether it's even a teacher or something like that. I mean, we're all gonna have to work together, and it's, I don't want many of our efforts to focus on infrastructure and academics if that reptilian part of your brain is going to be triggered every time you're in a classroom or something happens. Does that
Mr. Snow, we'll get an answer for you from our one of our licensed clinical social workers or one of our psychs, so we can get you a thorough answer on that. Because we need to engage a subject matter expert to.
I appreciate it, and I'll just sum up with this is, I was hearing on a radio show, kids from birth to 5, 2 months of trauma in their life will last their entire lifetime, longer than a teen that experiences trauma for several years. Trauma can be anything that somebody goes through, but I'm just saying those kids are going to be coming into our doors. And as a school district, unfortunately, we're going to have to work with them. We're going to have to work with our staff on how they are dealing with their stuff and how our students are going to be able to deal with that, so we could really get back to education and they can come out stronger and better. And if we learn and we build better, then they can teach their children on how to cope, how to deal with this if they have to go through it as well.
Well, we already started our work with a plan for trauma support for our staff in terms of professional development. So I'm going to have Lisa Utterback come up real quick and give you about a 2-minute explanation of what we have, and that'll be coming before the board here shortly.
Well, first and foremost, with our collaboration with curriculum and instruction support, all teachers in the district will participate in a 1-hour session regarding supporting social-emotional development through classroom culture. We took our social-emotional supervisor, our director of school counseling, our supervisor of social work, as well as our MTSSB supervisor, and put together training for all teachers to participate. In addition to that, we're working closely with our research division as well as Project Harmony on 2 specific projects. We're doing an SEL screener pilot in 3 of our schools as well as our freshman academy, ensuring that we do a checkpoint with where our students are at the beginning of the year, ensuring that we align resources and supports from the school counselor to the social worker to overall classroom management. 7 schools. I know Mrs. Snipes asked the question a few board meetings ago. We have 7 schools that are actually doing training right now for the ruler, which is teaching staff and students how to identify their emotions, self-deregulate, and then obviously creating conducive school environments where we have MTSSB strategies that are implemented with fidelity, ensuring that kids, when they're redirected, it's in a way that they're able to understand, remain in the classroom. And then through our counselors, we have the second step curriculum that all of you approved that's now a digital program that all of our counselors, K through 8, will be implementing in all of our classrooms, as well as we have a lot of social emotional components taking place through Naviance with our alignment with your advancement, your advisement classes. So there's a lot of things. And then obviously the work that we're working with Mr. Rayon and Dr. Logan, we're really excited about a program with Project Harmony, which is providing extensive professional development for all staff, district, as well as our schools regarding trauma, understanding what trauma is, teaching how to implement strategies within the classroom. So there'll be a 4-series training throughout this year facilitated by Project Harmony district-wide. That will be coming to you here shortly.
Thank you. I appreciate that because we are where we are right now, and I think we will make sure that our students are better prepared mentally for the future and how to deal with things that they'll encounter and be stronger in the end. So thank you.
Mr. Head?
Hey, thank you both for putting this together and for the work. I really appreciate it. It's great information. So I just had a quick question. I think it was last meeting, maybe 2 meetings ago, we had a taxpayer group that asked if they could be, engaged as well. I'd imagine that's coming up in the public comment section.
Yes, so, and I wanted to note that what we conducted during this period of time is what's in Nebraska Department of Education guidance referred to as stakeholder engagement. And so it was very specific to hearing from our teachers and staff. And so the public comment period will open up where they can actually respond to what we've shared thus far and give their thoughts, their input, and feedback on what they would like to see us prioritize and use those funds for. And all of that input, just like what we're getting from these sessions, will be factored into and taken into consideration as we develop the plan. Yes, and there will be a link on our website where they can click and respond to our progress.
Okay, awesome, thank you. You beat me to my next question. I was going to ask how we were going to publish that. So I'd imagine on the website, are we also going to put notices in the newspaper or anything?
So we will not be putting notices in the newspaper. If the newspaper chooses to publish that, we will use our district format where we can actually get the data into us directly and not, considering the time we have, we want to be able to make sure that it comes directly to us so that we can assess it and analyze it as it's coming in. Right, and one of the requirements is having record of who's responding and engaging with us, so that allows us to keep track of our engagement participants.
All right, great, thank you.
Ms. Cracky?
I thank you, and I wanted to know, when we get to the trauma part, have we identified enough individuals to help us with all that? Do we have enough in our system, or are we still hiring people to take care of the mental health, other factors there? Are they in here, or are they going to be coming in and out?
Ms. Utterback's going to come up.
And Lisa can tell me.
We do have our school counselors that work closely with students. We also have a lot of partnerships with Connections that when and if a student needs mental health supports outside of the school, obviously, we would work with the family and also align resources for the family to get extensive counseling. In addition to that, we have 49, we're adding 2 more this year, 51 social workers that work closely with our families and work with them on any additional supports that they may need.
And has that number increased along the way in the last couple of years?
What specific number?
The number of students that have some individual problems that we need to help.
Absolutely. I think the most important thing is we've identified a mechanism internally to work with students, and we have more supports with our counselors and our social workers and our school support liaisons. And obviously through the pandemic, all the work that our social workers did, over $3 million in rental assistance. And so our families, and I give a lot of credit to the schools, it's the school leaders that are working alongside their families and making them aware of those resources within the schools. And then also our school-based health centers around the district are obviously a pipeline when families need additional supports as well.
And I know you're going to do your best to take care of all those people and get them in here.
And you know, staff too, we have staff that
is trained.
You know,
in that
we're
way,
learning
too.
more about secondhand trauma. When an individual is in a traumatic situation and they come and they share that with the staff member, you don't just go home and leave it in your car. You carry it with you. And so working with human resources on Humana and opportunities for our staff to have access. We had staff members come to our food drives, staff members needing assistance as well. And so it starts with letting them know that there's people in the building that are there to help. And if we don't have the resources, looking at our agencies that are our partners through Project Harmony, Connections, and all other agencies that we're in partnership with.
And it sounds like you're going to have a full-time position plus when school is opening up.
Teamwork.
For sure. Come back and give us an update on that after school is already started. Thank you.
Ms. Snipes?
I guess one of the good things about going almost last is everybody asks all your questions. So, Dr. Fillmore, you mentioned earlier that you were all still reviewing. First of all, thank you for the presentation. Very much appreciated. And I also appreciate the comment about the secondary trauma, because I often think about it with nonprofits, but not all the times with our teachers, and that's just so important. So thank you for bringing that up. But you mentioned you were still reviewing the input, so I was just wondering, is there anything that's not in here that you're still reviewing, and what that might be? And then I had another question for that.
Sure. Yeah. So the main input that was not on here were the open-ended comments that we received from the survey respondents.
Okay.
Most of what I was talking about were the student and in-person and virtual engagements, just simply because with what was it, 8,000, just shy of 8,500 responses. That's a lot of content to code, and so that is currently in the process of us kind of going through it and making sure it's. We've taken care of everything, soup to nuts, as it were.
And then the question just kind of popped into my mind. It seems to me when you said the number of respondents, to me it felt like that was a larger number than what I've seen before with different surveys that we've done. Would you say that that's true?
I would say that what we received back is pretty typical.
Okay.
We typically see anywhere around 11 to 13% response rate.
Okay.
This was about an 11%, which is right on for what we expect.
All right, thank you.
Ms. Cassidy?
Thank you. And thank you for the presentation as well. Very, very good information here, and the work you folks are doing is, I applaud it. So I kind of acclimate this to like when great Aunt Edna passes away, unfortunately, and she leaves a great sum of money to the family.
So we call it Auntie Esser.
Auntie
Yes,
Esser left
there you
us
go.
some money.
And I imagine, you know, in the family, she leaves this money, and the parents sit down and have, you know, a discussion with the kids, and what are we going to do with the money, vacation. But I guess the piece, and I love the part about all the student input, and especially the shark. But I'm really interested in the staff. Can you tell me a little bit more about, are the staff just going to reanalyzing just what their responses were on the surveys, or will we do, or will there be, or maybe there have been already sessions with staff one-on-one such as there were with the students?
Right, so there will be a different approach to this extended engagement with our teachers in particularly.
Okay.
While roughly 2,000 of them responded to the survey, we know they were also on summer break and may not have seen it.
Absolutely.
We want to engage them more deeply by not just asking them, you know, to prioritize the pillar, but what do you need? What do you feel like you need to do your job well under these circumstances? What types of professional development will best support you? So the questions will be a little bit different in addition to getting them to prioritize. The purpose of the prioritization part is if you responded to the survey, you're giving your individual thoughts, right? We know that the process doesn't work like that, where I just get to say, these are the things that I want, and we get to do them. So part of what teachers and our principals get to do is to work in groups, and some of you had an opportunity to observe this in action during an in-person session, but you get to get in groups and talk about why does it matter. So you're choosing things, but why are you passionate about that? Why does this give you so much energy? And why do you think we should do this in particular? So after sitting around in a group with 7 or 8 people, and I tell you, okay, you got to tell me 5 things that were important to you. We just discussed 35 things are important. And from this group, you can only tell me the 5 most important. So you're getting people to talk to each other and build consensus and start to do their own form of prioritization, much like what we may have to do as a district, because we recognize we can't do everything. And so we have to get to a place where we see what are the most important things to do. And it just allows them to go through that process to build consensus, not only as a group, but within their content area. So for teachers, they'll be able to do it as a group of math teachers, as a group of science teachers, and speak more specifically about what they need for their respective content areas.
And this will be done, I'm assuming, fairly certain soon when
Yes.
school starts. Okay.
This is happening on the August 11th and 12th during curriculum days. All teachers attend curriculum days, and we are built within their curriculum day schedule. So we are one of the sessions that they will actually attend during their curriculum days.
Okay. You hit the nail on the head. My concern was during summer, if they've just answered, I know how that goes.
Right.
Summertime, you're answering a survey, you're just, yeah.
So they get to do both ends, do
That's
some of the
perfect.
survey portion.
That's
and give
exactly the
additional
answer I was
input.
hoping for, so
Yeah,
thank you.
because we had over 3,000 staff respond to the
Yeah.
survey, so then we're also going to do a deep dive.
Okay,
Yeah.
great. And I appreciate that number that responded. That's a great sign
Yeah, it was
of what's
fantastic.
ahead.
It was
so-
fantastic.
Great, I appreciate it. Thank you.
Vice President Erdenberger?
Thank you, Dr. Holman. Mrs. Kratke and I had the pleasure of attending one of these events out at Burke High School, and I found it to be really helpful, and the small group engagement part of it really helped not just me think through what was going on, but and I actually didn't participate in it. I sat in on a bunch of different groups, but just, mentally engaging with it and seeing people having to prioritize, I think that that's a good step. And as Mrs. Cassidy just said, you're right, the teachers in the trenches will be able to come up with some pretty useful priorities under those circumstances. Would you share with us, please, something that I vaguely remember being told at that session, which is there's a deadline for our application. We have to apply for how we're going to use these funds to the Nebraska Department of Education, and then they forward it or approve it. So would you just go through what's happening next and the deadlines, the deadlines we're operating under?
Right. The original deadline was September 1. That deadline has been extended to September 15. So we get 2 additional weeks, 2 additional weeks to put together the plan. So yes, we build a plan and do the funds allocation to that plan, and we submit it to NDE. That's where our level of approval stops, and they take it from there, and we'll respond back via our internal grants management system, which is the state system that lets you know about the approval and the award dollars that come through. And then something else happens in the world of Scott Roberts where those funds actually are released and, are distributed out to schools. But for us, our directive is we upload that to NDE within that system that they've created.
Let's assume, okay, at some point, you're going to have to say X amount of dollars, 4 pillars, Y amount to each of those pillars, and for what? Which sounds like a horrific undertaking. Although I do want to say that the puppies sound like a great idea. Or maybe just 1 puppy per elementary school, because I know that that works. So once you have gone through that 3-layer chess process, does that come back to us, or do we approve it? Or I'm really just asking what the mechanics are at that point before you submit it to NDE. If you tell me, no, that's not what happens, it's useful information, but what is the process at that point?
So on August 16th, we will show you the plan in terms of how the funds will be allocated to each of the pillars. And we will also identify those top areas that we'll be supporting with those funds under each pillar. So as part of the budget approval process, that the budget would be approved, but you all will have the opportunity to see the details of what areas under those pillars that we will support with those ESSER funds.
I guess I
So
didn't.
we'll be making a recommendation, so let me make sure we're clear on that. We're making a recommendation to the Board of Education. And it is likely that all of the funds will not be allocated because we don't feel that we'll get to that part. I think Mr. Roberts spoke before that we could potentially need a budget amendment because it's going to take some time. Because of the very tight timeline, I also want to correct the record in terms of Aunt Esther's because it's not quite reverent to our taxpayers. So I know it was meant as a fun comment, but it could be construed as not taking the money as serious as our taxpayers do. So I just wanted to make sure that I said that. But we'll be making a recommendation based on the feedback that we've had thus far, but it is likely that a lot of the money will not be allocated because we just won't be ready. The timeline to spend that kind of money is just not enough time to do it well. Scott, do you want to talk? Mr. Roberts, I'm sorry, do you want to speak about that?
To dovetail on that just a little bit, so it's not likely that the state, because the application deadline is after the fiscal year starts, we're not likely going to be able to include any ESSER 3 money in the budget that we submit in about a month. We are planning on including the ESSER 2 monies in there, which we're bundling into these solutions. So I think there's 2 different exercises. One is, how are we planning to spend the ESSER 2 and 3 funds over the next 3 years? Then there's the component, which is ESSER 2 driven, that will be included in our budgetary ask for 21-22. And as Dr. Logan mentioned, just like we did with the amendment this year, we can always come back to the board if we've got these great initiatives and need additional funds to reallocate more money into the next fiscal year to spend.
And
I think I vaguely remember you telling us that now. So we don't have to submit a plan for the huge amount of money on September 1st. We're really talking about the ESSER's 2 money.
No, we do have to submit the plan for ESSER 3 by September 15th, but they do give us an opportunity. They recognize that you may not have everything figured out by September 15th. They do give you an opportunity to revisit your plan as much as you need to build upon it. Things may change with partners, vendors, resources that you plan and you have to revisit. They just ask that every time the plan is updated or changed, that is publicly accessible so that people continue to give their feedback or input on the changes and the decisions that are being made. So we are allowed to adjust the plan and update it and make changes as needed.
Okay, that's great. Thank you very
But
much.
we do have to still submit
This is a
it.
huge amount of work, and I really appreciate you guys putting it together this summer. And I don't want to be there between August 12th and our board meeting on August 16th, when you're trying to coordinate all the input from your curriculum days, but I really appreciate you doing that, because it'll be really useful. Thank you.
Thank you.
Mr. Snow?
Thank you, Madam President. So you'll be submitting to the board for approval both ESSERs 2 and 3. I'm just gonna go back to my soapbox on social emotional learning. We have to change the way, you are the experts at it, but as the issue happens when a child acts out in the classroom, we usually say, what's wrong with you? We should rephrase that, what happened to you? And also, anyone who's watching this, if you have experienced trauma or you currently are dealing with something, it's okay. Everyone is going through something, and if we can change our institutions to focus on that, our teachers to be able to identify that, our teachers to help each other identify that amongst themselves, amongst students, we can change the way our society and our community lives and grows. Your mental health is connected to everything, your physical body, everything else. And if you do not have a way for you to understand what's going on with you, and then also how to move forward and heal, then that will disrupt you in the classroom. And you can look at the data with right now, just our most recent test scores that we had in the district. The students are struggling with a lot of subjects, but we're dealing with a pandemic. We also have 1/3 of our students that are gonna be coming back for the first time.
Right.
And our teachers, nobody knows what they're gonna be expecting on that day. And I think this is an opportunity for our district to really go down that path on making sure that our teachers are better trained in that area, that our teachers are getting the support that they need, and our students as well. Majority of our district is non-white. Majority of families in the country, people in the country that don't get counseling and therapy are people of color. So I think that not my job to say an office of social emotional learning, but I think it should be something under everybody's title.
Thank you for that, and absolutely. And we've seen that just through the engagement with students. They do know more strategies than I thought that, they would share when asking them, what do you do when you're angry or upset, for them to be able to articulate, to us. Sometimes you just have to pause and you have to breathe, take deep breaths. You have to talk to your teacher. You have to tell an adult. So it is important that they have those skills, and even as young as kindergartners, they recognize that sometimes you have to breathe and you have to talk to an adult, and they have all said they talk to their teachers, and so it is important.
Mr. Head?
Yeah, thank you, President Dr. Holman. I just wanted to follow up and loop back on changes made to the plan. I think we have 3 or 4 years maybe to spend all the ESSER's money.
2024.
Okay. So then every summer, are we kind of going to go back to the stakeholders and do engagement again and say, okay, guys, do we still want to spend it in this route, or what's that going to look like?
So we do not have to go back through this same level of engagement. We do have to keep it posted and accessible where they can continue to give their feedback and we can receive that feedback. So to do this level of engagement as if we were reconstructing the plan, we do not have to do, but we do plan to progress monitor our work and look at how we're doing up against the goals that we've set for ourselves in terms of implementation and outcomes.
Thank you so much, Dr. Crow and Dr. Fulmer. We really appreciate your time tonight and your expertise in sharing all about the ESSER's plan and the progress that we're making.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Appreciate you. Okay, moving on to item J2B, the Budget and Audit Committee update. We had our meeting on July 27th,
And those in present were Mr. Snow, Mr. Head, Mr. Thielen, and myself. Also, Dr. Logan, Mr. Ray, Mr. Roberts, Mr. Ryan, and Ms. Rykowski. Just a quick overview of what we discussed. Our expenses will be increasing 2.6% from our prior year. Salary and benefits increased $6 million due to annual increases for negotiated and non-negotiated staff and staff for new schools. The increases are partially offset by anticipated vacancy savings. Supplies, materials, and equipment will be increasing by $16.7 million. This is due to one-time projects for 2 curriculum adoptions and 2 new school startup costs. We also reviewed activities in the 9 non-leviable funds that are budgeted for each year. The total for these 9 funds will be going up $59 million. There are 2 major changes from the 2020 to 2021 year. We added $86 million to the reimbursable grants for ESSER II funding. And then we had the co-op fund decreasing by $33 million primarily as a result of the discontinuance of the interlocal agreement with Miller Public Schools for transportation services. We also reviewed the preliminary levy for the year, which will be subject to change once property valuations are certified at the end of August. And a levy summary was provided showing OPS's total levy for the last 9 years. And OPS has reduced that levy in 5 of those 9 years. 3 of the 4 years that increase were solely a result of increased obligations in the bond fund. Some upcoming dates that you might want to be aware of. These are the same dates that I shared at our last board meeting as well. Property tax valuation data certified on August 20th. We'll process final changes to the budget on August 23rd. The Budget and Audit Committee will meet again around August 30th and the 31st. We'll have small group workshops with board members around that same time. There'll be a public hearing September the 8th, and then our Board of Education meeting will be September the 9th. We also had Mr. Darren Olson, who is our engagement partner from Syme Johnson, who provided an annual update for the upcoming audit. And some information that he shared with us was that our audit planning update, that our audits to be performed, the engagement team members, and the timing. He also reviewed the audit findings and the internal control matters from the prior audit with the committee. He also reviewed the single audit requirements with the committee, and it indicated they will be including special education, the medical assistance program, and either ESSER funds or Title I in their review this year. And then he also noted key accounting pronouncements that will be effective over the next 3 years and briefly discussed each. And colleagues, if you need any more specifics or you have any questions, please feel free to let either myself or mostly Mr. Roberts. Anything right now that we can answer for any of you? Perfect. Absolutely. Moving on to item J2C, Student Assignment Plan Board Committee Update. Ms. Cassidy.
Thank you, President Dr. Holman. Okay, colleagues, bear with me. Our meeting was on 7/26. There was so much information. I found myself actually trying to figure out how to present it to you this evening because it was a very full meeting, our meetings are very full of data and spreadsheets, so it's sometimes hard to articulate, but I'm going to do my best to sum up what you folks need to know. So really what we did was we went through an extensive update on all the boundary changes specifically for high school and elementary that are coming up for the 22-23 school year, and that's primarily due to the opening of all the new schools. So just to kind of highlight, I'll just give you a couple. So for instance, 42nd L Blue STEM, they will, of course, in 24-25, they will start with the 6th and 7th, or excuse me, at 22-23, 6th and 7th grade. They will not have 8th grade until 24-25. So we kind of went through each school and went through the configuration for each of the schools. Most of the transitions that are all going to be happening are going to be played out by 24-25. So some of the schools that are going to be losing 5th grade, gaining 6th, or going for the configuration of 6th, 7th, and 8th, it should all be played out by that year. Every middle school will be 6, 7, and 8, as I just said, by 2025. So that was kind of the highlight of all of those. I will tell you that staff is continuing to be very transparent. Getting ahead of all of these changes is really the constant in all of our meetings, making sure that all of these changes that are going to occur for our families are conveyed to the families as timely as they can be. So let me give you an example of some of the things. I'm going to focus on just a couple. So for instance, our dual language is one factor that's going to be affected by some of the families, of course, that are in dual language now. So right now, our dual language staff, some of the staff members, the bilingual liaisons, the student support liaisons have been calling nearly 700 families that are in the schools that are going to be affected. So they made about 675 phone calls. 232 of those were families in dual language, okay? So for instance, I'm gonna go with the Pine Street School on 10th and Pine. The schools that are affected that are gonna be then shifting to Pine are Bancroft and Castelar, for an example. Dual language is at Castelar. So 117 families are going to be impacted by that move going to Pine. 77 of those are dual language. Bancroft does not have dual language, but there are 114 families that will be impacted by the move to Pine. We went through each of the new schools and went through this material, so I'm just giving you this one school. Those staff members that I mentioned are diligently right now going through making those phone calls to convey to our families what those changes are going to look like when they are given a new school. Pine Street will be their school. So we kind of went through every school. I'm not going to go through that for you now. I know some of us are, we're cold and I'm ready to put a sweater on, but we did go through every single school such as that, okay? Okay, let me hit some more highlights here. Okay, so in addition to those phone calls, let me give you the high school. Okay, for high school, they went through the changes that are going to be taking place for 9th graders to 10th graders. That is primarily going to be impacting their transportation. Again, phone calls are made for that. Let me give you all the people that are making the calls here. Sorry, my notes, I have to skip around a little bit. Okay, so for the boundary changes, some of the things that are taking place. Of course, the phone calls are still happening, which we've gone over in several other meetings. There's print materials that are going to be sent out. June and July is when most of the phone calls were made. Emails and letters will be taking place in November coming up. And also, they're going to do letters at each of the schools. So the schools will have the opportunity also to convey the information to the families that will be affected by the boundary changes. We also went over again the pieces that are out on the website now for families to utilize. We've already talked about these in several of our meetings, but the Find Your School is on the website, which is very, very convenient. I've used it myself a couple times. You can simply put in your address and it will show you what your new school will be, if it will be changing. It will also, it's very clear, it shows you if transportation will be available. That we're still encouraging all of our families to please go visit if you have any if you need any more information about what your school will be either now or you can click on and look at in the next school year as our boundary changes take effect. There's also maps that are available on the website, which I did not realize, but each of the boundary maps are also on the website, which they highlighted. So this is also in both English and Spanish. So they've tried to cover all bases for our families that will be affected by the boundary changes. Let's see, letters are going to go out in November of 2021. So they're trying to really tackle it not only by phone calls, but by letters, print, any way that they can, so that all families are really, really aware of what's happening. I think that was the gist. I know I probably missed some, but basically we are continuing to make phone calls and make sure that all families are aware and encouraging families to reach out to, especially as we head back to school, reach out to their school level for any further questions or clarification as this process continues. But this group of individuals, all of our staff members that have been diligent in making phone calls, it's been really nice to see. They have been very encouraged and have told us that most families are really receptive and are understanding these changes, and that some of these changes are just due to transportation and due to the new schools. So it's been really nice to see the progress in the number of families that we're tackling, it's really nice to see that they've been able to get in touch with these families and really tackle it head on before, well in advance before things are going to be happening. So if you have specific questions about any of the schools and the boundary changes and when they're going to take place, certainly let us know. I didn't want to go through every single school, but just give you some highlights. Any questions right now? Did I miss anything, my colleagues, that were? It was a very full meeting, so it was kind of a tough one to summarize, but hopefully I've given you a few highlights.
Tracy, I just want to follow up and say that I remember when we were going through it, and I'm still new to this, so I can't remember who it was that was talking and said, oh no, we're going to call everybody. And I was sitting here going, that is not possible. But that is so impressive.
It is amazing.
It really is. And I think it helps us look like that personal touch and
Yes.
identifying individual families and following and solving problems.
And being so
That's
proactive,
amazing.
right?
Yes.
And I
no.
do want to commend all of our staff members. I mean, even our dual language teachers have been reaching out to those families that are going to be affected just in the dual language program. So, you know, you have to look at it's really a grassroots, ground up effort where even when I heard even our, you know, just teachers in the dual language program are making phone calls, I was floored. So it's really been a great group to work with. The changes are just vast and it's complicated. It's spreadsheet. I mean, even our meetings are just very data driven and it's hard to keep up, but they've really simplified it. I have to give nothing but kudos to Dr. McFarland, Casey Hughes, all of the folks that, you know, I don't even get to deal with, but those two folks are kind of spearheading our student assignment plan, and they've done a great job in trying to summarize it for all of us on the committee because it is a vast amount of information. So I know if it's a lot for us on the committee, the four of us, it's a lot for the public to understand and our families. So I do commend them for the personalization. Absolutely.
Thank you so much, Mrs. Cassidy, for the thorough update. Okay, so we have one receipt of report. Item K1, Head Start Monthly Board Report for June 2021. And moving on to closed session, Vice President Erdenberger.
I move that the Board of Education go into closed session for the protection of the public interest and for the prevention of needless injury to the reputation of individuals to discuss with the superintendent, secretary to the board, and legal counsel, legal advice, negotiations, and real estate.
Second.
Sorry, I have a motion to go into closed session by Ms. Erdenberger. Is there a second?
I said
Second, excuse me, second by Ms. Snipes. Roll call, Mr. Ray.
Snipes.
Aye.
Snow. Aye. Teelan.
Aye.
Cassidy.
Aye.
Erdenberger.
Aye.
Head.
Aye.
Holman.
Aye.
Cracky.
Aye.
8. Aye.
Motion carries. Let me remind the board that the purpose for closed session is for the protection of the public interest and for the prevention of needless injury to the reputation of individuals, to discuss with the superintendent, secretary to the board, and legal counsel, legal advice, negotiations, and real estate. Let the record reflect that the board went into closed session at 8:49 p.m. Let the record reflect that the board came out of closed session at 9:39 PM. Meeting adjourned.